Hello guys, and Russia's oil and gas revenues plunged 50%, marking the lowest level in Putin's era and perhaps predicting the end of his career. Russia is a country fully dependent on the export of its natural resources. So, the Ukrainian drone sanctions combined with your economic sanctions and Russia's diplomatic isolation lead to serious consequences for their federal budget. 50% of revenues lost, and that in comparison with January 2025. What is more important, modern Russian budget for 2026 was built with the idea of $59 per barrel, the price Russia wanted for their euros, but right now they already received just 35 and are prepared to lower this price even more for just $27 per barrel because India wants to stop buying Russian oil. Thumbs up for that. And honestly, this destroys more and more of big Russian companies that were once symbols of their wealth, like LUKOIL. I believe back in 2022 it was impossible for CEOs of LUKOIL to imagine that in 2026 they will beg Kremlin to support them, to give them money from the federal budget and not vice versa. So let's have a closer look. What is happening with Russia's oil and gas revenues, with oil prices, and what it means for the implementation of the only working peace plan, and that is to defeat and demilitarize Russia. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to continue watching how Putin destroys Russia, subscribe. We witness all of that and discuss all of that on the channel. Share these videos to spread the truth and the good news. So according to the Russian Ministry of Finance, they lost 50% of revenue in oil and gas in January 2026, comparing it to January 2025. We need to be honest, January 2025 was already bad for the Russian economy, but this January is even worse. So in total, they've lost 50%. That is the lowest level during Putin's reign. Another of many of his achievements. So they received $5.1 billion in January 2026 in taxes from oil and gas, and that is a 50% drop in comparison with just January 2025. This is very serious because traditionally Russia relies mostly on the export of its natural resources, and perhaps this is one of the main sphere from which they earn money. And right now, this is just 2% of Russia's GDP. That is a record low statistics. And what is more interesting, you need to remember that Russia's GDP is smaller than the GDP of Italy or the GDP of just one American state, Texas. I know you will say Texas is big, but Russia is the largest country in the world, and their GDP is way smaller than the one of Texas. So, with their small GDP, the revenue for oil and gas in January 2026 is just 2%. I believe there were times when it was 30, 40. So anyway, it is not the only area in which the Russian government that now desperately needs more money to continue destroying Ukrainian streets and destroying Russian streets with negligence and lack of resources in the regional budgets, but they rely on taxes. That was the reason why they increased VAT and destroyed a lot of mid and small-sized businesses. But they also lose revenue in other taxes. For example, key mineral extraction tax has fallen 60%. 60%. I'm sure that in many countries, when there are some problems in various spheres of their life, like 6% is already a problem. 6% is already, like a national alert. And in Russia, they've lost 60% in comparison to January 2026 in mineral extraction tax. Another losing area is export duties, 40%. 40% of revenues lost in export duties. Well, first of all, because we keep demilitarizing Russia and destroying their war economy, sanctions are working, and fewer countries want to buy something from Russia. And in this context, these updates from India are very promising. Unfortunately, this decision is not, like a result of the understanding that Russia commits war crimes against children, the elderly, taking away our heat in this coldest in a decade winter, but purely economic reasons. After a phone call between Trump and Modi, Trump promised that India will stop buying Russian oil. It's difficult to believe this is possible, but there are some signals that demonstrate Russia's panic and fear. First of all, Putin called Xi, and then Xi called Modi and Trump, and there were a lot of phone calls among these very unusual people. And it might be the reaction to Trump's desire to push India buy oil from the US or even Venezuela. Right now, we're not talking what is right or wrong, but we are focusing on the fact that Russia will lose one of its key trade partners, India. Right now, when their oil refineries keep exploding, when their terminals are destroyed, when ports are not working, and finally other governments who respect the international law started stopping and seizing Russia's illegal tankers, they fear what to do and they start selling the leftovers, the crude oil. They have no opportunity to transform it into various oil products that are more expensive. And India was one of their main buyers together with China. So this is another consequence. They do find customers, but they need to lower prices because of the potential negative consequences. Thank God for the secondary sanctions, and we need more. Just the announcement of a possibility led to serious economic troubles in Russia, so imagine what real sanctions may do. And when you good people of the United States, who now feel very worried about the updates from inside your country, outside your country, sometimes ask me, how can we help Ukraine? The best way is to keep talking to your representatives, to those who can hear, to those who can understand that sanctions, imposed sanctions on Russia, that will give the secondary sanctions to countries like India and China for buying Russian products, oil, and thus fueling that war machine, can help and can decide a lot. Because right now, Russia planned their 2026 budget with an oil price approximately $59 per barrel. Now they are selling for $35 per barrel of Urals. That is already oh my God, approximately, no, like $24 less than they wanted. A big problem for their federal budget. And they provide discounts for India up to 27% per barrel. This is literally nothing. Maybe it's already a negative, like Russians love say, negative income for the Russian budget. So they continue giving more and more discounts to keep selling at least something. And that is like they wanted 59 and they sell for 27, so that is like $32 less, more than a half. And this leads to more and more problems with their federal budget, and they predict right now $131 billion budget deficit increase. Not the budget deficit, but increase of the budget deficit. Thumbs up for that. And remember to comment and share these videos. Tell me what's your favorite Russian economic problem. It would be interesting to hear. What do you consider most dangerous for them? So, and right now after these conversations, it is predicted that oil shipment to India will be reduced 30%. That is devastating. So what I love about the economic problems is that they keep accumulating and they always have this avalanche effect. And there are so many signs. I don't know why people in the White House, people in the European Union, people in big media do not talk about them. They restrict withdrawals of money from bank accounts and ATMs in Russia. The inflation is growing. LUKOIL, Rosneft are begging the federal budget for some support because they are losing revenues. The forecast for oil prices is devastating, and the Russian budget is already empty, and there are more and more nationwide protests caused by problems in the Russian economy. So people, now is not the time to appease Putin. Now is the time to defeat Russia and to bring Putin to The Hague, not for an excursion, but for a very serious court that I'm sure we will discuss on this channel sometime really soon. Remember to subscribe to my newer channel, Anna Danilchuk, where we discuss longer topics on a weekly basis. Also follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord, and Substack for a weekly newspaper. Check the merch shop. A new collection, new drop is out. It's about love, spring, and war. Lots of good products that can turn you into the ambassadors of Ukraine, and that is one of very good ways to remind the world about Ukraine and to help us. United we stand. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channels. And please let me know if you're available this Saturday for our live conversation, 9 p.m. Kyiv. Love you very much. United we stand. Slava Ukraini!